It is first day, 10 p.m. and I just came home from work making a review. That's what I call dedication or insanity. And since I just came home from work, I am a little bit tired, which could end up in me being a little bit more chillaxed, which is maybe good, since a lot of people say I talk too fast, which could still happen though. But let's start with the actual review of the LG X Power. And if you have seen my first impressions video, you definitely know the highlight here, the battery life. But how good that one actually is and how well the phone performs otherwise, we will see in my full review. So let's just get into that here, starting with the design and build quality. As you can maybe see, it doesn't look all that spectacular, a little bit towards the boring side, but that is fine after all, because it feels very solid. There is some minor creaking if you press it maybe too hard, but the rest is just fine. We have these nice little curves everywhere, and it feels very round and very nice, not edgy or something like that. It feels a little bit more towards the boxy, bulky side for a 5.3 incher after all, with the bezels not being too big after all, but it feels more like a 5.5 incher to me. The back, not all that slippery, actually quite nice, and it feels good, that is fine. So here we have the LED, here we have the camera, on the top we have a microphone, here we have the volume rocker, definitely nice in terms of tactile feedback and all that. Here we have the SD card and SIM card tray. Here we have another microphone, micro USB, and the volume or the headphone jack. And sometimes the screen just turns on and off because we have double tap to wake and double tap to sleep. And you don't really even need the power button, which is placed just okay and no problems here at all. We have a notification LED, and that all ends in one thing. The phone is absolutely decent, and you will hear me saying this a lot of times because it's maybe not spectacular in anything, maybe besides the battery life, but it's absolutely decent so far. So let's check the display. 720p, 5.3 inches IPS, and that one as well is decent. Maximum brightness is still absolutely fine. It was okay, not maybe for the brightest sunlight, but still. The white point, absolutely nice. Not too cold, not too warm. Black is actually quite good. We have the normal amount of IPS glow, and the color calibration is, I would say, decent. It could need maybe, or wouldn't definitely hurt it if it would be a little bit more saturated. It feels a little bit towards the washed out side, but also therefore maybe a little bit more natural. So it's not one of these oversaturated screens, and it gets the job just done fine. Viewing angles are okay, maybe not the most stable ones, but if you just use it normally, I had no problem at all, and that's why I call it fine. So I would say let's start with the sound because the display is just fine. My opinion on the speaker, definitely not all that impressive. It's just about okay, because the maximum volume is fine if you block it. You definitely have to cap it in some way, but it still feels quite weak, not a lot of bass. The mids are okay, and the highs are quite clear though, but overall it's just unimpressive. You have to cap it all the way. It's backfiring, doesn't sound... yeah, it's good enough. It gets the job done for a YouTube video here and there, but don't expect too much. Where I was actually surprised though was the headphone jack quality, because it's loud, louder than the usual Snapdragon phones that I usually review, and it sounded absolutely okay. And this is definitely above average, actually one of the better ones, something I did not expect at all. So let's check the performance, and I will kill off all the apps. We have that done, and let's launch a few. As you can see here, it's maybe not the quickest one. There are definitely some that manage this faster, but it's absolutely okay. Absolutely no problem. I would not call this slow. Of course, with just 2 GB of RAM, I noticed that the RAM management seems a little bit more on the harsher side. So we will definitely see some apps getting, especially something like Studio, get kicked out quite early. But browsing performance is absolutely top. I can't complain here at all because it's quite smooth. We have some kind of motion blur smoothness, but that's kind of a quite common thing these days with LCD displays, but the browsing performance is absolutely fine. The rendering times, of course, are not on flagship level, but the scrolling is very, very lag-free, all good here. And the same thing goes actually as well here for Phoenix, because as you can see here, there's not a lot of stutter going on. It's just maybe not crazy smooth, but for this price range, absolutely fine. I can't say anything else. It's mostly that it's not snappy or super fast, but it's smooth and pretty lag-free. And if you just want that, which is absolutely fine in my book, I don't think you need all that much more, because as you can see here, and even the multitasking, as you can see, it's maybe not crazy fast. Or if you use too many apps, it will kill the apps. But once the app is loaded, it's fine. I didn't really think that the performance was bad, so it's definitely a solid mid-ranger. Gaming performance though was quite weak, not a lot of frames, quite some slowdowns. The heat was no issue at all. That is actually the good thing, because you don't have to bother about it. But I just have to say the gaming experience was not good, and I would not recommend this if you want to play some heavier games. Of course, the casual games work and all fine, but if you want to play some games that are faster, or especially some quite intensive shooters, I would say go for something else. That's not what this phone is trying to achieve. What it is trying to achieve though is make up therefore with an impressive battery life. A full charge takes 2 hours and 40, at least that's what it took me, which is fine considering that the battery life after, or the battery size is after all 4100 milliamp hours, and it's okay because now I don't want to get this wrong, but the battery life here is insane. And if you manage to drain this phone in 1 day, I think you have a different problem in battery life, because then you need some help. Because on my very first charge, and the phone was actually completely new, so it was its first cycle, I managed 8.5 hours over the course of 2 days in heavy mixed use. And that already was impressive. But from then on, the battery life got even better, and I managed, if I calculated upwards, I would say like at least 10 hours plus over the course of 1 day. But who would use his phone 10 hours plus in 1 day? So over the course of 2 days, I managed 9.5 and even 10 hours, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And no matter what you do, you should get at least 9 hours, but I don't even think you will get below 10. And I use the high brightness of 70%, because I think LG displays in general are a little bit more dull if you don't get at least to 70%. So the battery life is amazing. And I would even call this not just a 2-day phone, a solid one, but actually a quite solid 3-day phone, because you should still get around 3 hours of screen time every little day. And if you are someone who's just using his phone very occasionally, 4 or maybe even 5 days, but either way, wow, absolutely bonkers. Okay, let's check the software, because I can't praise the battery life anymore. Okay, in terms of software, we have lock screen targets, but I don't have them because you need for some reason to have a SIM card in, which I already have in my next review. You have quick settings, you can customize those. As you can see here, the look, I said it already on all the other LG phones, I like this minimalistic, clean design. And we have some nice features, because you can rearrange the navigation bar. And yeah, other than that, there's not too much to actually say, because we have some battery saving, of course. If you check the display settings, you can change the font, type, size. We have double tap, as I already said, screen and wake. Sound, nothing really special here. The software is quite bare minimum, because if you just see it, besides the themed look, it actually behaves very stock-like, and you don't really get that much more. Of course, we have, for example, shortcut key for the camera and so on, but I don't think we have to waste too much time on it. The software, in my opinion, is super solid. I like to call it supersonic, because it gives you all you need, a few little extras like the customization for the buttons and so on, and it doesn't really miss out on anything. So top. And software updates should come. I expect this to actually get nougat after all. So I would say let's get into the camera and start off here. And let me just quickly get in here to check the pictures. Selfies. Absolutely nice in my opinion. Quite sharp. And one thing that I have to maybe say, all the pictures seem a little bit over sharpened in my opinion, but I actually prefer this. As you can see here, not all that sharp, but actually still absolutely fine. For a $200 phone, or maybe even cheaper somewhere, the selfies are absolutely okay. Of course, if you go into a little bit more like room situations where it's not all that great lit, you see that it's not all that great, but still okay. But it definitely struggles in lower light situations and artificial light, because the viewfinder got very slow, very wonky, a little bit had some trouble getting things done, and it definitely needs a little bit more exposure and shutter times and all that. As you can see here, not the very best one. So there I was a little bit more disappointed compared to the selfies. And here in outdoor situations, I have to say I'm actually really surprised. Like I said, things seem a little bit over sharpened, which is fine in my book, but colors seem very accurate, exposure seems fine, autofocus seems fine, shutter times seem okay. Definitely okay. The autofocus does a well job. Sometimes it had a little bit trouble, but usually it gets the thing just fine in my opinion. Sometimes, as you will see a little bit later, tap to focus was necessary in some more specialized situations. But even here, the exposure is absolutely okay. not always impressive, but here I can't call this anything else but just fine. For a phone in this price range, I actually did not expect the camera to be nearly as good. I thought it would be a lot weaker, and don't mind the glare here because, or the lens flare, because that was my issue. The sun was very low all these days because I had to do it before afternoon, but it did a great job. As you can see, a lot of details here in the raindrops. Here, for example, as I said, you need tap to focus and things are fine. Maybe not always super impressive or super sharp, but didn't flank. It didn't fail usually, and that is what is impressive in my book. So all good. I can't say anything else for this price range. Really, really nice. Now let's check the video, and as I can already say for the pictures, it is absolutely solid. As you can see here, exposure transitions, maybe not always perfect, and the microphone is a little bit on the, I would say, a little bit too sensitive side. I just turned off the sound because you will hear a lot, so you should not block the microphone. Just keep that in mind. So as I said, exposure transition maybe a little bit on the harsher side, but the rest, of course, no OIS, so the footage will sometimes seem a little bit shaky, but I wouldn't really bother too about it, because as you can see here, focus works reliable. It's this kind of one pump focus, which in my book is absolutely okay, and it is sharp. It makes a good appearance. Can't really say anything else. Of course, we have the lens flare, I already said, but I think that is good enough about that. So let's switch back. Give me a second. And here we are. So I've covered that, and I would say let's get to the pros and cons. You can see those, and if you maybe look towards the pro side, you will see a lot of decent here. I actually had the speakers here as well, but I took them off because they are somewhere in the middle. They are decent, but after all, they are backfiring. But other than that, on the negative side, we only have slightly big for its size. That's a little bit more on the bulky thing. Backfiring speaker, slightly washout car, but really slightly. It's not a huge problem. And if you just use this display and not something super impressive, you should have no problem. And then there is the little bit more aggressive RAM management. Therefore, but on the pro side, we have an absolutely solid build quality. The display is still decent. The performance is absolutely okay for this price range. Maybe not quite on top of the very best ones, but it can compete with the normal mid-ranges, which is absolutely fine. This camera is super solid. And then we have the highlight here of the insane battery life. So just keep that in mind. If you want a phone without any real, at least not huge important flaws, you get that crazy, amazing battery life. And if you just want that, not to having to bother about the battery life at all, but have a phone that does all you need, maybe not always on a flagship level or not even close, but not on a level where you would say the experience is kind of bothered, because I could do all my stuff. I could do my emails, I could do my social media, I could do browsing, and everything here is just fine. It's maybe not snappy if you are a heavy multitasker and jump between the apps all the times, then you will maybe notice that you will bother it down or bonker it. I forgot that word, but it's fine. I didn't bring the performance down, so that was okay. But the battery life is amazing, and the overall performance is good. So for a price at least here at around $200, I can definitely recommend it if it's what you are looking for. If you're looking for some higher end qualities, in some regards there are different phones out there, but you wouldn't look at the LG X Power if you wouldn't look for the battery power that you have here. And I'm definitely absolutely impressed for what it is, because usually what the other LG X phones had were the one thing. They didn't really stand out in one thing. The LG X cam, the cam didn't stand out, and the phone wasn't all that great. The LG X screen, the second screen didn't really make any difference to the experience, and the phone itself wasn't that great. But this one is an absolutely solid phone with the one highlight feature that actually does stand out compared to the rest. And for the price, yeah. I don't think I have to say anything more. I covered it all, and I don't want to repeat myself any more than I have to. So that it is. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and you know the rest. If you have any questions, just leave them down below. Wish you a nice day. Until next time, bye.